Good morning, friends. Good morning, friends. I, Dr. Devesh Bandil, Associate Professor, Suresh Gyan Vihar University, that is accredited by NEC A grade. Today, I will discuss about hierarchical model. Hierarchical model is the database model. You know, database model is the topic of your database management system. Today, I will discuss about hierarchical model in detail, like object and outcome. What are the models of your database? What is a hierarchical model? Disadvantage of your hierarchical model? And also, in this lecture, I will explain characteristics of hierarchical model. And in this lecture also, I will take the example of your hierarchical model. Now I am sharing my screen. I hope you can see my screen. As per I had told in this lecture, I will cover object and outcome, what a database model, types of database model, hierarchical model, and also example of your hierarchical model. You know, if we will talk about the object and outcome of database model, you know, main objective of this lecture is that understand about the concept of your data model. Database model, you know, your hierarchical model and your network model and your ER model and your relational data model. And here I will take the hierarchical model in your briefly manner. Briefly manner means I will also take the example of a hierarchical model. I will also take the disadvantage of a hierarchical model. I will also take the characteristics of your hierarchical model. And if we will talk about the outcome of this lecture, so after this lecture, student will able to all database models like your hierarchical model, network model, and your ER model and your relational model. And also, student will able to what are the characteristics of your hierarchical model? What are the disadvantage of your hierarchical model? You know, before starting this lecture, before starting the hierarchical model, students should know about the database model. If a student know about the hierarchical model but don't know about the database model, so this is not a right way, this is not a perfect way that student know about the hierarchical model but student know about the database model, because the hierarchical model is the part of your database model. And now I am giving the overview of your database model. You know, database model define the logical design and structure of a database. Means through this model, you can define the logical design of your database and also define the structure of a database. And also you will define the how data will store. And in the another and also you can see that in your database model you can define the logical design of your database, structure design of your database, and how the data will store, and how you will access the data, and how you will update the data in your database management system. You know, database management is the composed from your two word database management, where your database, where you will store the data, and your management, where you manage the data. The database is that store the data, and management, where you will manage the data, is that your database management. You know, your software having two parts, your front end and your back end. In your front end, student will take the any programming language like your C, C++, etc. And in your backend, student will take the database for storing the data. Like suppose you want to make a software for college management system. In this language, in this software, you can choose the any programming language for the front end, and for the back end, you will take the database. And here your database, you know, database is the collection of your many tables. Data in your database, you will store the data. You will store the data of student. You will store the data of teacher. You will store the data of courses. You will store the data of programs. You will store the data of fees. Means there are so many tables, and in this table you will store the data. Okay, and as per I had told, like your relationship model. So here I will discuss about the hierarchical model. I am sharing my screen again. I hope you can see my screen. The means your database model define the logical design of a database, a structure of a database, and also you will define how to data will store, how to data will access, and how to data will update in your database management system. How do data will access means, suppose you are having a database, and in your database, suppose you are having so many tables, and suppose your student table, there are 1 lakh students are existing in your student table, and you want to access the particular student, you want to see the record of a particular student, means you can access the data. And suppose if you want to update the address of any student, address is the one of the column of a student table, and you want to update the address of a particular student. So through the, as per I had told, you will store the data, you will access the data, and also you will update the data in your database management system. And while the relational model is the widely used database model, you know relational model is the type of your database model. I had told about the hierarchical model, network model, relational model, and your model. So your relational model is one of the type of your data model. Relational model where your data will store in your tabular format. Here I am only giving the overview of your relational database model, where your data will be stored in your tabular format. Tabular format means in your two-dimensional format. Your one dimension is for row, and your second dimension is for column. And as per I had told, so many types of your database model, like your first hierarchical model, network model, model, and your database model. And now I am discussing about the hierarchical model. Hierarchical model, as the name implies, where your data will store in your hierarchical manner. And also you can say that your data will organize in your tree-like structure with a single root. Your root is the uppermost, and to which all the other data is to linked. So you will main focus in your hierarchical model, your data will organizes in your tree-like structure with a single root, to which all your other data will linked through your root, and the hierarchy start from the root. I had told your root is your uppermost level, means your first level. And your hierarchy always will start from the first level, from the upper level, that is your root. And you will expand into your tree format. It means you will add the child node to your parent node. This is your hierarchical model. The main key focus, the main key point in your hierarchical model, your data will organize in your tree-like structure with your single root, and all the other data will link, and the your hierarchy always will start from your root, means from your upper level, and expand a tree like structure, means you will add the child, and your child will add from the parent. In this model, the child node will only have a only single parent node. If we will talk about the hierarchical model, here I am talking about the hierarchical model. So in your hierarchical model, your child node will have only one parent node. Okay, not a more than one parent. In hierarchical model, your child node will have only one parent. And this model describe your real world relationship, like your index of your book, receipt, etc. Relation, relation means when you will define the relation between the two entity, like your mother and father, like your mother and son, like your brother and sister, like your husband and wife, like you and your friend. And in this hierarchical model, I had told your data will organized in your tree like structure with your one to many relationship. you know One to many, there are four types of your relationship. First is your one to one relationship, one to many relationship, many to one relationship, and your many to many relationship. Your one to one means where your one entity will linked from the another entity from only one entity, means where you will connect, you will related from only one. And your if we will talk about the one to many, where you will connect from the many, means that is your one to many, means where your one entity will connect the from the more than one entity of another table. And if we will talk about the many to one, so your many entity of your one table of your first table will connect from the only one entity of the another table. This is your many to one. And your many to many, where your many entity of your first table will connect from the many entity of your second table. So that is your many to many. So in this hierarchical model, data is organized in your tree-like structure with your one to many relationship between the two different type of data. For example, you can see one department can have many courses, many professors, and of the course of the many students. That is the here I am taking the example of your one to many, where you have only one department, and in your one department there are there are many programs are running, and there are many professors, there are many associate professors, there are many lectures, and there are so many students, and there are so many courses of courses, many students. This is the hierarchical model. And you can see in this slide your college. Here your college is your root. Your college is your root, and your department and your infrastructure are linked from your college. And yeah, in your department there are so many courses, there are so many teachers, and there are so many students. So your courses, teachers, and students are connected from your department. Here you can see your children have only one parent, like your department and infrastructure have only one parent, that is your college. And your course, teacher, students have only one parent, that is your department. And your theory and labs have only one parent, that is your course. So you can see here exam network database sorry, hierarchical database model. And also you can take the example of a hierarchical model. Here your motorbike is connect from your engine and your body. And also here you can see your engine and your body, both children have only one parent. Both children means your engine and your body, and engine and body have only one parent, that is your motorbike. And left door and your right door of the body, both also have only one parent. So that is the example of your hierarchical model. And because here your data will organize in your tree structure format, and also here you can see your engine and your body means every means children's are having only one parent. So that is the example of your hierarchical model. And also here you can see your children have only a one parent node. And in this hierarchical model, I had also told कि in your hierarchical model, your children will connect from only one parent node, means your children will have only one parent node. And here I am also discussing about the disadvantage of your hierarchical model. So your first disadvantage of your hierarchical model is that hierarchical model is complex. Hierarchical model is typical because your data will be organized in your tree structure format, and your one parent her child is allowed in your hierarchical model. You know, here your parent means your root, and also you can say that your parent per child is allowed in your hierarchical model, means here your child will organize in your hierarchical model and your hierarchical manner. And your data must be organized in your hierarchical fashion, and it is done without compromising the information. And there is a lack of structured independence in your hierarchical model, means your structural independence is so poor in your hierarchical model, and your navigation system is complex in your hierarchical model, and in your hierarchical model your data is independent. So these are the all disadvantage of your hierarchical model. First is your hierarchical model is complex, and your parent per child is allowed in your hierarchical model, and structural independence is the poor in your hierarchical model, and your navigation system is complex in your hierarchical model, and your in your hierarchical model data is independent. So these are the all disadvantage of your hierarchical model. And now I am talking about the characteristics of your hierarchical model, means features of your hierarchical model. So your hierarchical model does not support the many to many relationship. Your hierarchical model will support the one to many relationship. As per I had given example, your one department will have so many courses, will have so many students, will have so many professors, will have so many assistant professors. Okay, so means your hierarchical model does not support the many to many relationship. Your hierarchical model will support the one to many relationship. And deletion problem in your hierarchical model, it is a if a parent is your deleted, so child has also deleted automatically. This is your common truth. If your parent is a parent node is your deleted in your hierarchical model, so your child which are connected from your parent, so your child has also be deleted automatically. And your data hierarchy, data can be represented in your hierarchical tree manner. Your data will be stored in your hierarchical tree format, and your each child record can have only one parent record. As per I had told, I had given the example. Your one department has so many courses. Your one department have so many professors, students. So your each child record can have only one parent record. These are the characteristics of your model. Another characteristics are of this model is that a hierarchy through the pointer. Pointer are used to link the records. Pointer determine the which record is a parent record and which one of the child record. Okay, so this is the feature of a hierarchical model. Hierarchical hierarchy will be maintained through the pointer, means your pointer are used to link the records, and pointer also determine that which record is the parent record and your which record is the child record. And your another characteristics of this model is your minimize disk input and output. Parent and child records are stored close to each other when the storage devices. It help to minimize the hard disk input and the disk output. And also main feature of this model is your fast navigation. Due to short distance between parent to child, database access time and performance is improved. Okay, and navigation through the database is very fast in a hierarchical model. If we will talk about the network model, relational model, and your ER model, so in this hierarchical model, your navigation through the database is very fast and predefined relationship between the records. You know, in your database, there are so many tables, and in your tables, there are so many records. And if we will talk about the record, so your record is the collection of your so many fields. All relations are predefined. Root node, parent, and the child are predefined in your database schema. Schema means your all over design of your database is the schema. And here I'm overview of network model. This is your network model. Your not network model, this is the extension of your hierarchical model. And in this model, your data will organize in like a graph and are allowed to have more than one parent node. you know when we are when we are talking about the hierarchical model, so in your hierarchical model, as per I had told, your only one to many relationship is allowed, and there is only one parents of your child. And if we will talk about the network data model, so in your network data model, more than one parent node are available. And in the database model, data is more related as more relationship are established in the database model. Also, as the data is more related, and accessing the data is also easier and fast. If we will talk about the network data model, in your network data model, if you are accessing the data, if you are updating the data, this is also easier and more fast. And the database model used to many data relationship. And where when we are talking about the hierarchical model, so in your hierarchical model, only one to many relationship. Okay, and in your network model, your many to many data relationship is allowed. You can see in this image about the network database model, your A is your root, and B1 your B2 is parent. Here you can see your C1 and C2 both are children. And also you can see that Your B1 and B2 both are children. Okay, and C2 is the one children, and C2 have the more than one parent. Your B1 and your B2. And where if we will when we have to talked about the hierarchical model. So in the hierarchical model, your only one parent is allowed of your children. And here in this network database model, in your multiple parent are allowed of your children. And after hierarchical model, we have discussed about the hierarchical model. We had discussed about the network model. In your hierarchical model, I had told your data will organize in your text structure format. Only one to many relationship is allowed. Only one parent is allowed of your children. And in your network database model, your many to many is a relationship is allowed. Okay, and your more than one parent is allowed in your network database model, as per I had told. Okay, and now ER model is the one of the model of your database. You know, through the ER model, through the entity relationship model, through the ER model, you can define the whole over enterprise. You can define the whole over organization. Okay, where you will define the relationship between the entities. Here is the new word entity is the new word entity, who have some characteristics, you know who have some features, is the entity, person, place or thing. If we will talk about the example of your entity, student is your entity, table is your entity, because student have so many features, student have so many characteristics, like your student name, student father name, student mother name, student address, student city, student pin code, etc., etc. And in the same manner, if we will talk about the teacher is your entity, teacher date of joining, teacher address, teacher salary, teacher date of birth are the all characteristics of your table. And if we will talk about the relationship, because in the ER diagram, you will define the relationship between the entity, relationship between the entities. Okay, like your relationship in our real world are defined as your mother and father, brother and sister, you and your brother, you and your friend. There are so many relationships are existing in your real world. you know Here in your database there are four type of relations are defined, like your one to one, one to many to one, and many to many relationship, as per I had discussed in starting of this lecture. And as per I had told, through the ER diagram, you can define the whole over data organization. You can define the whole over enterprise. Okay, entity. You can classify the entity in two categories. First is your tangible entity, and second is your intangible entity. If we will talk about the tangible entity, so your tangible entity are those entity who are existing in your real world in your physical mode, is your tangible entity. And if we will talk about the intangible entity, so intangible entity are those entity who are not existing in your real world in the physical mode. If I want to take the example of your tangible entity, like your car, like your person, like your scooter, motorcycle. These are all the physical entity. These are all the tangible entity because these are available in your physical mode in the real world. And your intangible entity like your bank account. Bank account is the your intangible entity because bank account is not existing in your real world in the physical mode. And also your your entity, there are two types of your entity. First is your strong entity, and second is your weak entity. If we will talk about the strong entity are those entity who have key attribute is called the strong entity. Key attribute, key attribute like suppose you are having a table of a student and your them are so many fields of your student like your student name, father name, student mother name, student passport number, student ID. So through the student ID and your through the student passport number, you can identify the particular student. These are your key attribute. Through the roll number, you can identify the particular student. So your roll number is the key attribute. So your strong entity are those entity who have the key attribute, and through the key attribute, you can identify a particular thing, particular student, particular employee. And if we will talk about the weak entity, your weak entity, if your one entity is dependent on your another entity, is called the weak entity. Like your, and also you can say that who have no any key attribute is called the weak entity. Like your bank account number, your bank account is your weak entity. Okay, and in your entity ER model, I had told there are so many characteristics. So characteristics are the attribute. Features of entity are called the attributes. There are so many attributes. First, like your simple attribute, single value attribute, multi-valued attribute, composite attribute, derived attribute, and your key attribute. If we will talk about the simple attribute, through the simple attribute means who have not broken the attribute. You can't divide the attribute. It's called the simple attribute. Like your age. You can't divide the age. This is your simple attribute. And if we will talk about the composite attribute means you can break this attribute. It's called the composite attribute. Like your address, like your name. You can divide the address in your city, in your pin code, in your area, and also you can divide the name in your first name, first name, middle name, and your last name. And if we will talk about the single value attribute means attribute who have only one value is called the single value attribute. Like your age, like your date of birth. Date of birth have only one value. Age have only one value. It's called the single value attribute. Multi-valued attribute, where your attribute have more than one value. Like your student mobile number. One student can have more than the one mobile number. One student can have more than one mail ID. And if we will talk about the derived attribute means your derived attribute is not present the physical mode in your database. Only you can derive from the another attribute. Like your date of birth is mentioned in your database, so you can derive the age from the date of birth. The age is your derived attribute. If we will talk about your key attribute as per I had told, through the key attribute you can identify a particular employee, you identify a particular student. For example, If you are taking a table of your employee, so through the, and there are so many fields of your employee record: employee name, father name, employee passport number, employee ID, employee Aadhaar card number, and through the Aadhaar card number you can identify a particular employee. So your Aadhaar card number, your Aadhaar card of your employee is the your key attribute. Okay, and now your fourth is that, here you can see in this given slide, and also you can see in this given slide in your model. And if we will talk about the relational model, so in your relational model, your data will organize in your tabular format, in your table format, in your row and column format. Your data will stored in your row and column format. In your, this is your relational model. Here you can see your data is organized in your tabular format, in your row column format, in your table format. Table, your table is the collection of your row and your columns. Your student ID is the one of the column of this table, your name is the one of the column, your age is the one of the column, and in your another table, your subject ID, your name, and your teacher are the three attributes of this table. Here you can see your all data, like your student. Okay, and like your any other data, means in the rest data model, your data will organize into your table format, into your row and column format. Okay, and here I had taken the some questions which are related from this lecture. And after study this lecture, student will able to give the answer of these following questions, like your, which of the following gives a logical structure of database graphically? Graphically, I had also told in this lecture, key entity relationship diagram is the graphically database. Through the model, you can define the whole over enterprise. So through the entity relationship diagram gives a logical structure of the database graphically, and the entity relationship set represented in your diagram. Okay, so in this lecture, I had also discussed about the model. The rectangle divided in two parts represent entity set, relationship set, attributes of a relationship, and your primary key. So here I had also told about the all parts of your entity relationship model, like your all entities, like your all attributes. And in this lecture, consider a directed line from the relationship set as advisor to both entity set instructor and student. This indicate cardinality. One to one cardinality. Another question is that we indicate diagram by labeling the lines that connect your diamond and your rectangle. Diamond is used for the when you want to define the relation between the two entity. And your rectangle, in your rectangle you will represent the entity, like your student, so your student will represent in your rectangle. And for a big entity set, I had also discussed about the big entity set where your one entity dependent on the another entity. And also you can say that who have no any q attribute, just reverse of the strong entity. And your entity set that does not have the sufficient attributes to form a primary key. Here is the new word, is a primary key. The primary key is the attribute or set of attributes through which you can identify a particular tuple, you can identify a particular record. And weak entity set, represented, I had also discussed about the weak entity set in this lecture. And if you are collecting the storing information about your music collection and album, would be considered, your entity. I had also discussed about the entity in this lecture. And this question, what term is used to refer a specific record in your music database? For instance, information stored about a specific album. So, strength. So means after this lecture, student will able to give the answer of these questions. I hope you had understood about the hierarchical model, and also student will able to give the example of hierarchical model, and also student will able to network model, your model, and your relationship model. Thank you.